Hello everyone. Right, so today I want to discuss with you an organization called Prevent. So, a lot of people who are sort of new to the right wing and, you get involved in it, you have right wing views, you attend a couple of events, right? Um, your association and freedom of assembly, right, is protected by your human rights. There's literally nothing wrong with it, effectively. So, what is happening? This organization, Prevent, is going around targeting Gen Z, anyone like under the age of, let's say, 21, 22, even as young as 16. Now, there are people that have been affected by this where they've had to go to counseling, they've been expelled from their schools, and things of this nature. It's absolutely abhorrent stuff. Basically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to target the youth and scare them. They're trying to say that, oh, the way that you're thinking is wrong, and delegitimize that thinking by saying you need counseling. Um, Obviously, it's not on. It's really, really wrong. And they're using fear and intimidation tactics. They're going into people's houses and basically saying, oh, look, the consequences are you might go to prison, and, silly things like this. It's outright persecution. They're trying to slow down, if not outright stop, the growth of the right-wing movement. So do familiarize yourself with this organization and certainly do some research into it. Perhaps we can start some kind of a campaign to combat it. We must ensure that all of our activists are basically protected and looked after. That is something that ought to be a duty for all of us anyway. So with that in mind, one of these guys affected by this organization has produced a statement. There will be anonymity and a false name used, of course. So do please listen to this in its entirety. This is very important.
Hello there. Um, yeah, I firstly want to make this video for a particular purpose of mine that wants to address a major problem that is happening not just nationwide in my country, but is also a major warning to all future Western countries that will then soon adopt this form of, well, what I would like to call authoritarian state interrogation on one's minority ideology of one's say. And when I emphasize ideology, I am, of course, talking about right wing, conservative, or, outside mainstream far left rhetoric, forms of politics and ideology. This is not my real name, but you can address me as Bob. Bob is not my real name, as I emphasized before, but I am using this as a cover name to hide my real identity, as I would like to keep myself anonymous. My story that I'd like to tell you is how I was basically mentally groomed by the state under a state national British program called Prevent. Now, if you research Prevent, that you can research online, is that it's a government program which is part of a counter-terrorist unit program that basically monitors potential radicalized young individuals that the state has the suspicion, or the authorities have the suspicion, of committing acts of terror. Now, that might sound like that's basically part and parcel of what the state should be doing in response to terrorism across the globe, which, by the description of it, sounds, moderately fine. However, unfortunately, this has basically been preyed upon by this new authoritarian left-wing purge of an ideology that has infested the entirety of the UK, from the top Home Office to the very edges of the government and into the police brigade of local authorities and local councils. I am about to tell you the story of how I got victimized by this particular program. And what I would like to share with you is certain information of how you can quickly reduce your involvement within this program, and how you can either play along or how you can subvert the authorities of what they want you to be accused of when you know that you're not. I know this might sound very complicated of how I'm starting this conversation and how I'm starting this monologue in, but this is just a major serious warning of how young British men, especially that are right lenient, who are very active online about their politics, should consider being careful about once they have been monitored by the government on how they will be basically tested by the authorities under this program. Prevent is like what I like to describe is a very grooming form of a social program by the British police. It's an organisation that tries to act for your good of your well-being and tries to, by parts of paper or parcel of paper, that it's trying to reduce your involvement within your political affiliated groups to basically under the guise of you being, by basically saving you being radically groomed by them, which is basically a good of subversion of you treating your ideological friends, either online or as you know them in person, as your enemies, when really they're not your enemies, and technically they are the best allies that you can. But this form of clever manipulation and subversion by the Prevent program is clearly working on a lot of young youths. Now, of course, am I condoning Islamic terrorism and how the state should follow them? No, not at all, because Islamist terrorists have a clear incentive to kill people, native British people, within our own borders indiscriminately because they are white and they are kafar to them, which is the religious slur expression that Islamists often refer to non-Muslims. But this demonization by the police brigade from lobbying from far left agitators within British media and the British political system is a clear, sinister attack of undermining British form of nationalism of all sorts. Prevent has been closely monitoring certain far-right populist groups such as British First, the EDL, UKIP, and Generation Identity. That is obviously a European identitarian ethno-nationalist group. And what they are trying to do is that they are trying to prey on people like me who were very new to the ideology but tried to make it public that they were members of. But what they're trying to do is that deep down they are trying to obtain vital information about your involvement here, while going under the guise that they're trying to basically allow you to escape their legal expression. What they're basically saying is that they are the safety skin between you as well as the police knocking on your door and putting you in handcuffs and giving you a criminal or terrorist act. It's a very effective form of legal blackmail that the police can use to legally prosecute you without even committing a form of offence or crime. So my story begins where I first uploaded a video that wasn't very good, but I felt determined in this video to create my own form of expression of a need of British right-wing activism that would take action on the ground. Now, this video wasn't very edited well. The voice, of course, wasn't very great. As well as, generally the viewership count was very little. In fact, it only roughly got around 310 views, which anyone that, uses YouTube or uploads on YouTube knows that that's a very tiny amount of people watching it compared to videos that get thousands of views or even hundreds of thousands of views. So, once I uploaded that video, a few weeks after, I got a knock on the door by two very intimidating looking blokes identifying that they were from the counter-terrorist unit, which, first of all, from a person that knew little of my involvement of getting deep underground of the law, I was of course very shocked for them to just, basically break into my house, sit me down in my own living room, and demand me to talk. Now, what I could have done, which is what I should have done, but unfortunately I wasn't informed of this, was that I should have basically thrown the blackmail at them, which is what they least expect. Because what you should first do, rule one, once they knock on your door something legally and what they're trying to accuse you of, is that you should antagonize them by using your mobile phone or smartphone with a camera and try to use that as your weapon, as your video recording proof to put them in a bad light, which is the first thing I should have done. But of course, unfortunately for a naive young man such as me, I of course love playing by the law. So of course I try to play, the good citizen of trying to answer their questions in a good, non-provocative stance. So what they did was they used the same old-fashioned form of tactics of leading questions, of trying to accuse me of something that I was what. They first wanted to point out of their intelligence gathering that I was somehow a member of Generation Identity, and I was an active member, when clearly there are no records of me of ever having any infiltration within Generation Identity. In fact, the only things that they could basically show me as proof that I was basically lying to them was me, I was basically at the time interested in their organisation. I wasn't an active full member, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to basically be, I wanted to put their stickers. I wanted to purchase their street stickers and put them around in my local area, which I saw many other people were doing around my area as well, and I only wanted to partake. So therefore I wouldn't have been the first one in my local county to do it. But unfortunately, by the same time that I ordered those stickers, it was the same day that those counter-terrorism, policemen entered my house to give me a second form of interrogation. And what preceded that was a clear, awkward moment that I was basically backstabbing them, of giving them the false impression that I was not a member, when they saw that as proof that I was. So I showed them the direct proof, and I went on the website, I showed them my monitors that I was directly not an exact proof, but they did not take that as granted. So what they do to you is that they either use the good cop versus bad cop routine. If you understand the nature of what that routine is, of when they're trying to interrogate information about you, is that the good cop mentality is trying to put a person that tries to convince you that they are your friend, and this is a very effective form of grooming that the state were using. So what they did to me was that they offered me a service where I would speak to this individual. I'm not going to identify the name, gender, or character of this person, but I will identify the personality of this person. This person had a very good relationship with me, and that was what it was meant to be for. This person was meant to get me to be relaxed and very, honest about my ideology and my thoughts and feelings in politics. But the thing is that they openly asked me after, once I cancelled my relationship with this person, was that the police told me that you're not meant to be that person's friend, that individual's friend. In fact, they are only meant to, in essence, gain information out of you, which I felt utterly betrayed in the end, and that basically broke that relationship with that person. And then eventually they decided to not put that individual's services to me because that person had further far-right operations up in the north of England, which hence is what was basically going on and what the police are currently doing in trying to spook the far right into authoritarian submission under the British state. So after that really, tragic relationship breakup with this individual, this was not the most controversial bit of the whole program. What they did to me was something which I felt I was being betrayed by them, which wanted me to break up the entire relationship with this organisation in the first place. Now, of course, this whole message of this story is meant to tell you that you should never ever start a relationship with these people in the first place. I cannot emphasize this any furthermore, because if you pursue this relationship with them, you will only be exploited. Only be exploited when they will clearly try to trick you into thinking that you are being exploited by the somehow identity, group of people that they are trying to convince you that you are being groomed by. When in fact, they're just basically lying to your face and they're acting hypocritical in their own, authoritarian nature. So, to start with this controversial part of the page of my story, it starts with me going on a trip in Dublin to see, a political activist, as you all know, who's a great philosopher, whether you disagree with his, his political momentum stance or not, of the famous guy, as we all know him, as Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was hosting an event in the Free Arena within a part of Dublin that hosts, many great comedians and talkers, which was a major public event. It wasn't of any, shady or declassified, nature that was unknown by the authorities. It was a very much a public event that I paid money to, and I basically paid my plane ticket, flew there, and then booked a hotel. After seeing the event, I went to my hotel to rest for the night, and once I got up really early in the morning so I could catch, a bus to go back to the Dublin airport, and then fly back to my county's airport, which I'm going to keep disclosed here. Now, it was all fine and dandy until I got back to my county's airport. The moment I stepped out of my plane and entered the county airport, there were 3 highly suited, as what you'd call men in black, border policemen who were basically looking and scanning every passenger on that plane that I was in's passport to find and then identify me. And once they found me, which they recognized by my name because they didn't know what I looked like, they then basically proceeded me to take me in, and it was a very awkward moment of 6 hours of interrogation, personal depravity, personal deplorable tactics of humiliation onto me. It was a complete depravity of my basic human rights, as I could best put it. I hadn't committed anything wrong. I hadn't smuggled anything illegal through my plane flight to another country from back. I hadn't done anything in my best manner to alert them that I was a criminal of any sort. But yet, because of my ideology, and because of my part and parcel within the program of Prevent, this was a tactic by the border police to spook me into basically scaring me that I should stop taking foreign travels through what they would deem as suspicious travels instead of holiday makings, as usual public people often do. So, as they took me in, I actually asked questions why they were detaining me, and they didn't try to answer me. In fact, they merely blanked me. They tried to blackmail me into basically not talking to my parents, because of course my parents were about to pick me up and send me back to my apartment. So it was a very awkward 6 hours wait of pure depravity of my basic human rights, where they would interrogate me for 6 hours straight, and they used, as which you can research on the Home Office, they used the old legal act of the 2000 Terrorism Act, which is roughly the Detainment Terrorism Act more accurately, where basically, by law, the border police, if they suspect you of causing harm within the United Kingdom, they have the right to detain you and interrogate you by a number of questions about your travels, where you've been, what you've had, and they basically have a right to ransack all your belongings, what you have, and also they, technically, what I found, which was very, unjust, which I had no consent of giving, I had no choice, because if I would refuse all of this, they would classify me under the Terrorism Act, which would be worse than a criminal record. And if you're labelled under the criminal record, that means you cannot freely travel to most countries across the world without being detained and sent back to your native country, which deprives your rights as an international citizen. And the Terrorism Act is worse because it adds the Criminal Act, and it also adds a couple years of prison, which would further, fuck your life up as a civilian within the United Kingdom. of your prosperities and your career and your opportunities. So this would have happened if I would have refused the asking of the questions which I saw as basically an interrogation process. And what they also did, which was very controversial, now this is the crux of it, they also told me that I had to give biological DNA, where they would basically put, earbuds, which is a form of cotton which can soak up your gland DNA, where they would put it in your cheek, and then they would grab your saliva and your biological forms of DNA that they would keep on record. And they proceeded me to put in my fingerprints, as well as take photos of me to profile me, to make a further profile that if I was going to cause trouble to the British state and what they would classify me as, then they would have a deep, highly good form of identifiable record of me by process. And this, you've got to remember, I did no process. I could have easily, in my view, if that was going to happen to me, I would have known about it, because I would have known I would have committed a criminal offence. But I got to give a really straight form of factual information about me. I have not committed any forms of criminal offence. I have not broken the law. I have not done. I've never even. I'm now a fully qualified driver. I've got a full qualified driving license. I haven't gained any points on my driving license. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I play it by the book, I play it by the rules, and I respect the British state, even though that I politically believe that it's gone so authoritarian that I think somebody needs to speak up about it. And yet, despite all of that, because I was under the Prevent program, the border police basically blackmailed me to be under that circumstance, whether I wanted it to be that way or not. I had no choice in the matter, because escaping that would only mean further detainment and possibly a further a criminal offence. So this is the scary nature of what they are possibly doing. And I don't know if I'm the only one, and I possibly know that I'm not the only one, because I guess that there are many moments of people that are fully active members within far-right populist movements across the UK, but have also been under the same circumstance of same, authoritarian treatment from the British police. So my further warning to you is that if anyone who is listening to this, is that if you're willing to be brave enough to speak up about your populist far-right lenient politics online, be very careful and do not ever underestimate the consequences and the legal, applications that might follow suit afterwards. Be very discreet and know your rights as a citizen, and know your anonymity, because the major mistake I did was that I had no choice, because I was all under the Prevent system. So, this is just my personal story. Of course, I haven't got a very good full grasp of the entire outset and the outlook of the operations that Prevent does within its operations across the UK. But I'm just speaking from my own personal experience of what I was under the programme. And I hope that if you clearly have listened to what I've possibly said from my story, you can then possibly learn of how to avoid and possibly understand your legal rights as a citizen to get yourself out of the program. Because the very major mistake I made was playing by the book and being groomed and slowly used by them. And look what happened to me right now. Luckily I haven't got a criminal record. I haven't had my legal rights, destroyed by this. I am now, a moderate system, but the government now has pretty much, decided to, ignore now. But if I bounce back and I make further content that defies their narrative, I could be then repaid a visit, unfortunately. And this is just the unfortunate nature of my civility right now. So, if you're watching this, be very careful on what you step, because on what you step might change the course of your future as well as your outcomes. So, that's me.